Okay, we're going to be doing part 4 of voting and elections. In part 1, we talked about democracy. What is democracy? We talked about some of the historical barriers to voting. In part 2, we talked about some of the factors that may influence why people vote or why they don't vote and who gets out to vote. In part 3, we talked about the different types of elections. We talked about primaries, we talked about general elections, we talked about special elections. Now we're going to be talking about campaign financing. We're going to be talking about campaign strategies, and we're going to be talking about, well, who actually gets elected in the state of Texas. Okay, so here are the learning objectives. Who gets elected in the state of Texas? What do our politicians look like? What are some of the characteristics of the people that do get elected, and why do they get elected? What kind of campaigns and strategies do they use? What kind of funding techniques do they use? Financing techniques do they use? What's the difference between hard money and soft money? Because there is a difference. Well, when it comes to Texas, uh, it depends on, at what level a person's going to be elected as to what that person actually looks like, the demographics. So at the local level, the people that get elected tend to be more diverse. They tend to reflect the people in any particular area, and the local levels are basically the city council and the county commissioners. So their educational backgrounds are going to be more diverse. I mean, not everybody's going to be a lawyer, not everybody's going to be college educated or whatever. Their income, it just depends on what they're working at. Some may have like good paying jobs if they're attorneys. Some may have not so good paying jobs, but they're going to reflect the interests of that local community, and so their professions are going to be quite dissimilar as well. So just more diversity at the local level. Now, when it comes to the state level, there's more homogeneity, or they tend to be more alike. And so we tend to elect in more white Protestant males than anyone else. There's been some diversity in terms of women and minority, but certainly not at the same level as what the demographics reflect in Texas. And that's just another way of saying there's about 50% women in Texas. We do not have 50% women in the state legislature. So there is more diversity, but certainly not at the same levels that you would think that there would be. Now, when it comes to the general election, that's when we actually elect the president at the national level. There's going to be two factors that are going to dominate who's going to get elected. And these two factors are party identification, whether you affiliate with the party, and how strong an identification you have with that party that you really want your candidate to win. Then you're going to go vote. The other one is incumbency and name recognition. So incumbency is probably a new word for you. So let me talk a little bit about that one. Incumbency just means the person that's currently holding the position. It's a state legislator, a state rep who is currently the state rep, and he's running for office again. He would be known as an incumbent, and he probably has a pretty good chance of getting reelected, because he would have what we call name recognition, that people may not know who he is or what he does, but they say, oh yeah, I think that's the guy that's in office now. And it's usually, unless they really mess up in some way, they usually get reelected again. So party identification is a big factor. Incumbency and name recognition also play a large role in people getting elected. Some other variables that we should consider when people are going to be running for office is that which party is going to be able to mobilize groups to go out and vote. Okay, so let's talk about mobilizing groups. They call it the party base. That they know that the party base is going to go out there to vote. The Republicans have had much more success in mobilizing their party base to go out and vote, because they say that the interests are aligning, or are aligning with the political parties, so that they will more likely go out to vote. The Democrats have not had very much success in mobilizing their base. A lot of people say, oh, well, yeah, I'm a Democrat or whatever, but I don't really vote. I don't really vote. And so because the Democrats don't go out to vote, the Democrats are not going to elect Democrats. So, when I have told you before that Texas is very conservative, that Texas is a red state, so then the question is it a red state because there are so many people that are conservative, or is Texas a red state because the Democrats don't go out to vote? So just keep that one in mind. All right, so the interests that are aligned with the political party, again, as I said, if you feel very strongly, that you are a Republican, you're going to go out and vote. Democrats seem to have a little bit more problem with that. And so when it comes to Republicans, the businesses are the ones that tend to support the Republican Party more so than the Democrats, and teachers tend to support the Democratic Party. And so then the big issue becomes, all right, well, what about the minority votes? You have to know that here in Texas, that the minority population is growing. We covered a section on that. And because the minority population is growing, the different parties are going to have to court the minority vote. That's what it's called. They need to court the minority vote. It is said that the Hispanic population is the sleeping giant. And so what that means is that if the Hispanics ever do go out and vote, that they can have a lot more political clout in the state of Texas. Now, that has not exactly happened yet. There are many different groups that are trying to wake the sleeping giant to get the Hispanic population more interested in what's going on in the electoral process, in voting, in registering to vote. All right, a lot of times people say, well, I'm going to vote for this particular person because I agree with his stance on a certain issue. And so usually when these politicians are going to be choosing which side that they're going to be supporting, it's going to be based on party affiliation. It's going to be based on that party platform that I keep talking about. How they feel about education, how they feel about healthcare, how they feel about in the environment. All right, so because they know that their party base also follows that platform, what they will do is that they will look at public opinion polls in order to take a position on any type of policy aspects of where it should go. Like, let me give you an example of this one. When we talked about the parties, I told you that there are two things that Republicans do not like. One of them is welfare, and the other one is healthcare. Now, when it comes to healthcare, that's like such a Republican way of looking at things, saying we should not subsidize healthcare. And so when they have these public opinion polls, they will ask people how they feel about Obamacare. They will ask people how they feel about the subsidizing the Obamacare, the penalties and the fines about Obamacare. So they will kind of craft their questions in order to see how they're going to be responding in terms of legislation that they're going to be passing. So polling is fundamental. They spend a lot of money on these public opinion polls to find out what the public is thinking so that they will know whether they should support a position or not. A big part of campaigning is going out there and taking the stump. That's what we call it. When they're going to a lot of different groups, and they can be small groups, they can be huge rallies, and what they're doing is that they're traveling to speak to diverse groups about a lot of different things. They will use the media, the TV, the radio, newspapers, social media. They have Facebook pages. The parties have Facebook pages. The candidates have Facebook pages. They do Twitter. They do Snapchat. They have really taken to this social media. And do you know the use of social media was actually spearheaded or started by President Obama? Because when he was running for president, and he knew that the party was not supporting him, he went to social media to build his base. And so that base was basically the 18 to 24-year-old cohort. And so, he was asking them via Twitter, via Facebook, to please contribute to his campaign. So he's the one that kind of got it started, and all of a sudden the Republican Party said, oh, well, we never saw that one coming. We better get our act together. So now social media is a big part of campaigning as well. They also have to use these things called political consultants, and you've probably not familiar with those at all. But when they go out to take the stump, as I said, they have to say, okay, we're going to be talking to this group, and we're going to be talking to that group, and we need to go to this neighborhood over here, and we need to talk to them about certain different issues, policy issue areas. So, for example, if they go talk to a bunch of old people, they're not going to talk to them about Head Start programs because the old people are saying, no, tell me about Medicare, tell me about Social Security. And if they go talk to a bunch of soccer moms, you can't really go talk to them about Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security because the soccer moms are saying, no, tell me what's going on for my kids. I want to know what programs are going to be available for my kids, what you're planning to do. So these political consultants kind of plan where they're going to go. They plan the strategy. That's what it's called. They plan the strategy of what they're going to be talking about. Uh, and so they have to target the groups in order to try to appeal to them so that these different diverse groups will vote for that particular campaign, that particular candidate. And then when it comes to the negative campaigning, that's also called the mudslinging. And so the mudslinging has usually, back in the olden days, it started like maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the actual election. Now it starts almost immediately. And it's in the campaigns, it's on Twitter, it's all over the place. So that when people say, well, does negative campaigning help you make your decision? And so the voter said, well, sometimes it provides information that I would not have known otherwise, but it's kind of like here to stay. And the more recent campaigns have had even more mudslinging than has been in the past. Okay, then you should be asking, well, then where does this money go? Where does it come from? Where does it go? All right, let's talk about where it comes from first. Anybody can make a small individual contribution, and it's actually capped. It's capped at $100 here in Texas. Now, a lot of times there is a school of thought out there, or there is a public opinion out there that's saying, is corporate America really running the government? And the reason that they keep asking this is because these things, and they're the PACs, and that stands for Political Action Committees. And these are the people, the lobbyists, if you want to call them that. But what they do, these political action committees, which are the lobbying arms of big business and professional associations, they contribute huge sums of money, but it's for certain purposes, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the situation is this: they're saying people are getting a lot of money from big corporations. Are they buying the politicians? And that's the question that people keep asking, and people keep asking. People can also get loans from banks, or they can get loans from wealthy friends, or they can finance their own campaigns, such as Donald Trump, who is financing his own campaign. And so then you ask, well, where does the money go? Well, in more traditional campaigns, it has gone to newspapers, to advertise in newspapers, on the radio, on billboards. They still do some of that. More so, they do the bumper stickers and the yard signs. They have phone banks, and phone banks are pretty expensive to run. And the phone banks are basically people that call you, and they're asking for your support. They're asking for you to vote for their candidate. So they will call, and not only will they call while the candidate is running, they will also call on the day of the election. And the Republican Party is much better at doing this, that they will say, please go vote. If you need a ride, let us know. We'll send somebody to go get you. So they utilize these phone banks to mobilize these voters, to get them over to their side and to mobilize the voters to go vote. Now, when it comes to the use of media and social networking, the media can really help, or the media can really hurt, because the media is instantaneous now. We have all of these cable network news channels that pick up on things immediately, whether they're true or they're not true. You have to kind of ask yourself about that. As I said, they all use social networking, and that's almost instantaneous now as well. Now, you do have to pay for, especially like Facebook pages or some parts of Facebook pages. You need somebody to sponsor you. And so when it comes to media, if there's a story there, the media will go after it. if there is a story there, if the candidate tends to say outrageous things, the media will pick up on it. Now, you know what? Whenever you're going to be campaigning, the whole area of campaigning has had to become more professionalized. And I talked about political consultants just a little bit ago. And so political consultants are used in a different way as well. Let me tell you a story about our former governor, Rick Perry. He's run for president of the United States twice. And the first time he ran, he had his oops moment. He didn't do well. He dropped out. And so when they were kind of thinking about it and doing some analysis of where did he go wrong, and it was basically his political consultants were not sufficient for the national stage. They did really well for him within Texas, but not at the national level. And by the time Perry figured this out, it was too late. It was too late, and he dropped out. So, all of a sudden, when it comes to building his image, because he didn't really have a very strong image, a very presidential image, let's put it that way. So then, while he was still governor in his last term of governor, all of a sudden Rick Perry started to wear eyeglasses. And so, and I thought to myself, oh, look, they're changing his image. And so he was trying to come across as being more intellectual. And he kept asking people the question, do I look smarter now? Do I look smarter now? So they were trying to build his image for him to come across as being more intellectual, more presidential, if you want to call it that. Then he ran the second time, and again he didn't have this support, so he dropped out of the presidential campaigning the second time around as well. All right, and I told you before, polling, these public opinion polls, I mean, they're crucial to elections to find out what people are saying, how they're going to vote, how they're planning to vote, and so that costs money as well. That costs a lot of money as well, but that is crucial. This thing called direct mail campaigning, what that does is that they will look at different areas and they will say, okay, we need to target this particular area because we think that there may be some swing voters there. So we're going to go ahead and send them information about the candidates, send them information about send them information about that. And so it costs money to mail things as well. Okay, so let's kind of come down to Texas and see what does Texas allow. And these are for the elections in Texas. For the elections in Texas. Okay, before you can run in the state of Texas, you have to have an official campaign treasurer. So you have to appoint one. Now, once you appoint that campaign treasurer, then you can start accepting money. But as I was saying a little bit ago, is that there's small contributions. They have to be less than $100. So you're an individual and you want to contribute to somebody's campaign, cannot be more than $100. And this campaign treasurer has to file statements. They have to file statements about the money that's coming in and the money that's being spent, the money that's being encumbered, the money that's being spent. And so they have to file these financial statements with the Secretary of State. I've told you before, the Texas Secretary of State is the one that has everything to do with elections. All right, if for example, there's a candidate who is spending money on things other than campaign activities, then they may be brought up on ethics charges, and there may be criminal and civil penalties assessed for violations of these ethics charges. And it's the Texas Ethics Committee that would file these charges. So as I said, this money can only be spent on campaign related activities. They cannot be spent on anything personal. Now you can take in as much money as you want as long as it meets these requirements of less than $100. and there's no limit on the amount of money that a person can spend, and the campaigns keep getting more expensive and more expensive. You know, the last time that President Obama ran for president, he spent over $1 billion on his campaign. Can you believe that? All right, so I mentioned the word the lobbyists. I mentioned the word the political act, or the term political action committee, so I want to talk a little bit about that right now. Political action committees can contribute large sums of money to the campaigns, but they're contributing for what they call party building activities, and it's called soft money. Soft money has no limits. So these contributions that are made through these political action committees, through these corporate lobbying arms of businesses and trade associations, they can contribute big bucks, but not for the campaigns, for party building activities. Okay, there's a fine line. There's a fine line, and that's why they have that ethics commission to say, have you crossed that line? So the laws that we have, the campaign reform laws, make it difficult to limit campaign spending. And at some point, I think we do need to pass more campaign reform laws. They have billions of them out there at the state level as well as at the national level, but there's always loopholes, and they find the loopholes. Okay, I want to tell you a little bit about these websites. The first one is the Texas Secretary of State, the one that has everything to do about elections in Texas, if you want to get some information. The second one is the Republican Party here in Texas. The third one is the Democratic Party here in Texas. And let me talk a little bit about the LWV Texas, and that's the League of Women Voters here in Texas. And so, you know what? A lot of times when people say, I'm an independent, I'm going to be voting on the issues. And so that's fine if you want to vote on the issues, but you kind of have to know what the issues are. So there is one organization, it is a nonpartisan organization, and it's called the League of Women Voters. And this is the website for the League of Women Voters in Texas. And so, and I highly recommend that you look at it. If you say, I don't have a lot of time to do research, I don't have time to keep up with what's going on, this is a website that you can go to. As I said, it's not partisan. They are not Democrats. They are not Republicans. Their whole function is to educate, to educate. And so they will say, okay, so these are the people that are running. The people that tend to support this candidate support him for this reason. The people that tend to oppose this candidate oppose him for this reason. And so then they'll tell you about the issues. People that support this issue support it for this reason. The people that oppose this issue oppose it for this other reason. Even to the point, these constitutional amendments that I told you that we have, that a lot of times the way that they are worded is not always obvious of what you're voting for. They will say, this is a constitutional amendment, or even the city propositions. This is the way it reads. This is what it means. People that support it for these reasons. The people that oppose it for these reasons. So if there's one website that you would say, I would like to check something that tells me just like basic information, this is the one to go to, the lwvtexas.org.